Ino stood out from her peers from an early age due to her preference for male friendships. While most girls her age were navigating the complexities of female friendships, Ino found solace in the straightforwardness and camaraderie she experienced with boys. This preference wasn't just a phase, it continued into her college years where her social circle primarily consisted of male friends. Ino was known for her charm, confidence, and an easygoing nature that made her well-liked, but her choice in friends often raised eyebrows among her female classmates. At college, Ino befriended Peter, Ronnie, Alan, and Brooke, who were essentially the campus celebrities. Peter was the quintessential leader, always ready with a plan, charismatic to the core. Ronnie, slightly more reserved, had a way with humor that could lighten any mood. Alan was celebrated for his athletic prowess, embodying confidence and physical strength. Brooke, on the other hand, was the creative spirit, whose ideas were as unpredictable as they were exciting. These four were the epitome of popularity, admired for their looks, charm, and social status, yet Ino managed to forge a close connection with them, seeing beyond their surface-level allure. As Ino's friendship with Peter, Ronnie, Alan, and Brooke intensified, whispers and outright warnings began to circulate among her peers. The female students, who often observed these boys from afar, knew their reputation for being charming but potentially dangerous. They shared stories of heartbreak and manipulation, cautioning Ino with phrases like, "Be careful, Ino, those guys have a way of getting what they want," or "They're not the princes you think they are." Ino, however, was steadfast in her belief. She had seen the boys in moments of vulnerability, had shared laughter, secrets, and adventures with them. She trusted her judgment over the gossip, often responding with, "They're different with me, we're friends." She laughed off the warnings, her confidence in her friendships unshaken, believing she could discern the true nature of these young men. Her dismissal of these cautions would later haunt her as events unfolded, showing the gap between perception and reality. Ino and the boys formed what seemed like an unbreakable alliance. Peter was the orchestrator, always with a new plan or adventure, his leadership binding the group together. Ronnie added levity with his humor, often diffusing tension with a well-timed quip. Alan, with his athletic build and confidence, was like the group's protector, while Brooke's creative ideas brought an element of whimsy to their outings. They shared a dynamic that felt familial. Ino was not just included, she was celebrated within this group. They referred to her in jest as their queen or lucky charm, which she took as signs of affection and acceptance. Their bond was built on shared experiences, from study sessions that turned into philosophical debates to impromptu road trips that tested their endurance and camaraderie. Ino felt she had found a place where she belonged, where she was valued not for her gender but for her spirit and intellect. These adventures ranged from the mundane to the exhilarating. Late-night drives where they'd sing at the top of their lungs, weekend trips to nearby cities for cultural festivals, or simply hanging out at the campus coffee shop discussing life's big questions. Each outing was a testament to their bond, reinforcing Ino's sense of belonging. They had their rituals, a movie night after exams, a hike when someone felt overwhelmed, or just spontaneous dance sessions in the rain. These moments were not just fun, they deepened their connection, making Ino feel she was part of something special, a chosen family. However, the seeds of doubt occasionally flickered in her mind when she noticed the boys' eyes lingering on her a bit too long, or their comments taking on a slightly different tone. As months turned into semesters, the dynamics within the group subtly shifted. Ino had always been seen as one of the guys, admired for her wit, confidence, and beauty. However, the constant proximity and shared experiences began to alter how the boys viewed her. Peter, often the most outspoken, was the first to voice these changes. During a casual hangout, he remarked, "Ino's not like other girls. She's cool. She's one of us." This statement, while seemingly innocuous, hinted at a growing undercurrent of different emotions. Ronnie, Alan, and Brooke echoed this sentiment, their glances towards Ino now carrying a weight of curiosity and perhaps desire. They began to see her not just as a friend but potentially as someone who could fulfill their fantasies, wrapped in the guise of their close-knit friendship. The shift in perception led to private conversations among the boys where their thoughts became more explicit. Initially, these discussions were filled with laughter and bravado, but they quickly escalated into something more sinister. They fantasized about Ino, discussing what it would be like to take their relationship beyond friendship. These talks were often late at night when inhibitions were low, and each boy was secretly gauging the other's reactions. Peter would lead with comments like, "Wouldn't it be wild if..." followed by fantasies that crossed ethical lines. They rationalized their thoughts, convincing themselves that because Ino was close to them, she might be open to or even expect such advances. This dark side of their friendship was kept hidden from Eno, who remained unaware of the brewing storm. The pivotal night began at their favorite college club, where the atmosphere was electric with music, lights, and the promise of letting loose after exams. Eno, dressed in a way that accentuated her natural beauty, drew not just the admiration but also the focused attention of her friends. The night was filled with dancing, laughter, and shots, with each boy taking turns to dance with her, their touches lingering a bit longer than usual. The alcohol flowed, lowering their inhibitions further, and their behavior towards Eno became more suggestive, though still masked by the facade of fun. In the echoing noise of the club, amidst the strobe lights and the beat of the music, Peter leaned close to Ronnie. His breath was heavy with alcohol, his eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and mischief. "Tonight could be the night," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the din. This wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment idea, it was the culmination of weeks of late-night talks where they'd ventured into darker territories of their fantasies about Eno. Ronnie looked uneasy, his gaze shifting between Peter and Eno, who was laughing with Alan and Brooke. "Are you sure?" he asked, the weight of his words heavy with moral conflict. Peter nodded, his confidence unshakable, fueled by alcohol and the thrill of the taboo. "She trusts us, she'll understand," he said, convincing himself and trying to convince Ronnie. Alan, who had been more vocal about his doubts, caught the tail end of their conversation. "This feels wrong," he murmured, his eyes on Eno, who was still blissfully unaware. Brooke, usually the joker, had kept quiet but now chimed in with a nervous laugh. "You're all crazy, but what if she does understand?" The plan wasn't articulated in specifics, but rather in the shared understanding of crossing a line they had only fantasized about before. Their rationalizations were built on a foundation of misplaced trust and the dangerous belief that their friendship gave them permissions they didn't possess. As the club's energy began to wane for them, Peter suggested moving the party to a hotel room he had booked just in case. Eno, still in high spirits and trusting her friends implicitly, agreed without a second thought. The air outside was cool, a stark contrast to the heat of the club, and the walk to the hotel was filled with laughter and the playful banter that had always characterized their group. Once inside the room, the atmosphere was initially one of camaraderie. The space was small, equipped with a single large bed and a couch, the decor neutral and forgettable. They continued drinking, playing music from a small speaker, and engaging in the kind of friendly challenges that had defined their friendship. Eno, feeling safe and loved, joined in, her laughter ringing out as she tried to keep up with the boys in their drinking games. However, as the night deepened, the games took on a different tone. The boys began to encourage Eno more aggressively to drink, their laughter now tinged with an edge of something darker. They were no longer just friends having fun, there was an intent behind each pour, each playful nudge. Eno's reaction slowed, her speech slurred, and while she still managed to laugh, her control over the situation was slipping away. Peter, Ronnie, Alan, and Brooke watched this transformation with a mix of fascination and predatory glee. Their earlier plan, once just words in the dark, was now taking shape in actions. They justified their behavior by saying things like, "She's one of us, she'll get over it," or "We're just having fun, right?" The descent into betrayal was gradual, each drink, each laugh pushing them closer to an act that would redefine their relationship. The hotel room, with its plain beige walls and the slightly musty smell of old carpet, had initially felt like just another adventure spot for Eno and her friends. It was small, intimate, almost cozy, with its single large bed and a couch that had seen better days tucked in one corner. They had entered with laughter, the night's escapades at the club still echoing through their giggles and slurred words. Eno, dressed in a simple yet elegant dress that clung to her with the promise of another night of fun, had laid down on the couch, her body already betraying her with signs of heavy intoxication. Her head lolled back, her eyes half closed, a smile still playing at her lips from the night's earlier joys. The boys, however, were animated, their energy not waning but rather intensifying, fueled by alcohol and the dark anticipation of what was to come. Peter, ever the leader, suggested more drinks, his voice persuasive, almost hypnotic in its insistence. "One more for the road," he said, handing Eno another shot, his eyes watching her with a mix of admiration and something darker. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier with unspoken intentions. Ronnie, Alan, and Brooke, each in their own way, contributed to the atmosphere, their actions driven by a cocktail of lust, peer pressure, and the false belief that their friendship with Eno gave them certain rights. As Eno's consciousness faded, the boys' behavior shifted from playful to predatory. Peter, with a calculated move, lifted Eno from the couch to the bed, rationalizing it as helping her to rest. But his touch was not that of a friend. It was the touch of someone about to enact a fantasy-turned-nightmare. The other boys watched, their expressions a mix of excitement and hesitation. They whispered among themselves, each trying to convince the other and themselves that this was okay, that she was one of them, that she would understand or at least forgive, but their actions were devoid of consent, a stark betrayal of the trust that had once bound them. Peter's hands on her were the first to cross the line, his whispers meant to soothe but instead serving to mask the violation. Ronnie, perhaps the most conflicted, tried to rationalize it, telling himself she was just too drunk to understand but would laugh it off later. Alan and Brooke, caught in the moment, followed suit, their previous reservations drowned out by the collective momentum of their actions. They convinced themselves that this was just an extension of their friendship, not seeing the harm they were inflicting. As dawn broke, the hotel room was bathed in a harsh, unforgiving light. The curtains, which had once been pulled closed with the promise of privacy and fun, now seemed like barriers to the reality outside. Eno stirred, her body feeling as though it had been through a battle. Her head throbbed with the aftermath of alcohol, but the real pain was deeper, a visceral ache in her soul. Fragments of memory began to pierce through the fog of her hangover. The laughter, the drinks, the feeling of being carried to the bed, and then nothing clear, just sensations and snippets that didn't make sense. She sat up, her movements slow, her mind struggling to piece together the night. Around her the boys were in various states of sleep or drunken stupor, their faces unguarded but unfamiliar in this new light. Did you guys? Eno's voice was barely a whisper, her throat tight with fear. Peter, who had always been the most audacious, opened his eyes, his expression one of smug satisfaction. "Yeah, we did. You seemed to enjoy it," he said, his voice casual as if discussing the weather. The words hit Eno like a physical blow, her heart sinking as the reality of betrayal settled in. The shock quickly turned to anger, a rage that boiled up from her core. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice escalating from a whisper to a scream, the sound bouncing off the walls. The room, once a place of laughter, now echoed with the sound of her pain. Ronnie, still drunk and slow to react, tried to placate her. "Come on, Eno, it was all in good fun. You're one of us, remember?" His words were meant to soothe, but they only fueled her fury. Alan and Brooke, waking up to the tension, looked at each other with dawning fear, their earlier bravado gone. "You're monsters!" Eno hissed, tears beginning to stream down her face, her body trembling with the weight of her emotions. The betrayal was not just physical, it was the destruction of the trust she had placed in them, the dismantling of a friendship she cherished. Her voice rose again, a scream of pain and anger. "How could you do this to me?" In the dim morning light, the hotel room seemed to shrink around Eno, her emotions a storm brewing within her. As she stood there, tears streaming down her face, her eyes caught the glint of a small kitchen knife left on the counter. It was a simple thing, meant for cutting fruits or perhaps cheese, but in that moment it became the embodiment of her pain, her rage, her need for some form of retribution or expression of her agony. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, not from fear but from the intensity of her emotions. The boys, still in various states of disarray from the night's events, didn't immediately notice the change in atmosphere. Peter, trying to assert some control, his voice laced with a mixture of shock and authority, said, "Eno, put the knife down." But his words were met with silence, the air thick with tension. Eno's mind was a cacophony of betrayal, hurt, and a desperate urge to make them understand the depth of her pain. She felt detached from herself, as if she were watching from above, seeing the once trusted friends who had turned her world upside down. The confrontation was sudden, a blur of movement and emotion. Eno, with the knife in hand, moved towards Peter first, her actions driven by a mix of vengeance and despair. He tried to defend himself, but his reactions were slow, his movements sluggish from the night's excesses. The knife found its mark in his shoulder, and his cry of pain was the first sound to pierce the heavy silence of the room. Chaos ensued. Ronnie tried to reach for Eno, his voice pleading, "Eno, stop this!" But his words were drowned out by the sound of her rage. She turned to him next, the knife striking again, his cries joining Peter's. Alan and Brooke, now fully aware of the horror unfolding, attempted to escape, their earlier laughter and camaraderie a distant memory. Eno's attacks were not precise. They were an outpouring of her shattered trust and violated self. Each boy faced her wrath, their pleas for understanding or mercy falling on ears deafened by her own screams of betrayal. The room, once a place of friendship, was now a scene of violence, the air thick with the scent of blood and the weight of what had been done. After what felt like an eternity, the room fell silent, the only sound being Ino's heavy, panting breaths. She dropped the knife, her hands slick with blood, and stumbled back, collapsing onto the bed. The reality of what she had done began to seep through the fog of her emotions. The bodies of her former friends, now still, lying around her. Her phone buzzed, bringing her back to the moment. With trembling hands, she dialed emergency services, her voice shaking as she said, "I need the police. I've killed them. They hurt me, and I killed them." The operator's voice was a beacon in the darkness, trying to guide her through the immediate aftermath, but Ino was barely coherent, her mind reeling. When the police arrived, they found a scene of unimaginable horror. Ino, in a state of shock, didn't resist as they handcuffed her, her eyes hollow, staring at nothing as they led her away. The room was now a crime scene, the once jovial atmosphere replaced by the stark reality of violence. The courthouse was a cold, imposing structure, its walls echoing with the footsteps of those seeking or administering justice. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with tension as the trial of Ino began, capturing the nation's attention. Her case was discussed in newspapers, on social media, and in living rooms across the country, sparking debates on justice, trauma, and retribution. Ino's defense team was led by a seasoned attorney known for handling complex cases involving trauma. They argued passionately that Ino was not just a perpetrator, but a victim, whose actions were a direct result of unimaginable betrayal by those she trusted most. They brought in psychologists who testified about the effects of trauma, particularly sexual assault, explaining how it could push someone to act in ways they never imagined. These experts painted a picture of Ino as someone who had been pushed beyond her limits, her mind and spirit broken by the assault. Ino's testimony was the pivotal moment of the trial. She stood in the witness box, her voice initially steady but cracking as she recounted the night's events. She described waking up to the harsh reality of what had been done to her, the laughter of her friends turning into a nightmare. The courtroom was silent, all eyes on her as she spoke, her pain palpable, her words a testament to the trauma she had endured. The prosecution, however, painted a different picture. They acknowledged the assault but argued that Ino's response was not self-defense but murder. They highlighted the premeditation involved, pointing out how she had chosen to use the knife, suggesting her actions were calculated rather than a spontaneous reaction to trauma. They questioned the ethics of taking justice into one's own hands, no matter the provocation, emphasizing the need for legal consequences for such violent acts. The jury was torn, the community divided. Some saw Ino as a tragic figure driven by desperate circumstances, while others saw her actions as criminal, regardless of her victimhood. After days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict of manslaughter, acknowledging the trauma but also the severity of her actions. Ino was sentenced to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 6, a sentence that left many questioning where justice truly lay in this case. Upon her release, Ino emerged from the prison gates into a world that had moved on but not forgotten her story. She was no longer the vibrant, trusting young woman who had entered college. She was now cautious, marked by her experiences. She relocated to a new city, one where she could start anew, away from the memories that haunted her. Ino's new life was quiet, but she found purpose in the silence. She began working with organizations that supported survivors of sexual assault, sharing her story not for sympathy but to educate, to prevent others from enduring the pain she had known. Her advocacy work was her redemption, transforming her personal tragedy into a force for societal change. She spoke at schools, universities, and community centers, her narrative serving as a cautionary tale of trust, betrayal, and the complexities of consent. Ino's story sparked conversations about how society should handle friendship, consent, and the repercussions of trauma. Over time, she found a community of survivors and advocates, people who understood her journey and shared her mission to create a safer, more understanding world. The scars of her past remained, but she carried them with a new resolve, using her pain to illuminate paths for healing and justice for others. Her life post-prison was not about forgetting, but about learning, growing, and giving back. As we reach the end of this deeply affecting narrative, we invite you to reflect on Ino's journey by engaging with our content. If this story stirred something within you, please click the like button to show your support, and consider subscribing to our channel for more stories that delve into the human condition, exploring the depths of emotion, morality, and the consequences of our actions. We also encourage you to join the conversation by leaving your thoughts in the comments. What do you feel about Ino's actions? Were they justified under the circumstances, or did she cross an ethical boundary? How do you think society should address the intricate issues of consent, trust, and betrayal within friendships? Have you or someone you know ever experienced a betrayal of trust? How was that situation handled, and what lessons were learned? What can we as a community learn from Ino's story to prevent such tragedies in the future? Your engagement helps us understand the impact of these stories and fosters a community where we can discuss and learn from the complexities of human relationships. Thank you for watching, for sharing, and for being part of this dialogue. Remember, every voice contributes to shaping a world where such stories remain cautionary tales rather than lived experiences.